Amelia Harper was a force of nature in the world of technology. At 35, she carried the quiet confidence of someone who had spent years mastering her craft in the bustling innovation hub of Austin, Texas. For the past 3 years, Amelia had dedicated herself to developing a groundbreaking risk prediction model, a dynamic system capable of analyzing market fluctuations across multiple industries in under 10 seconds. But this wasn't just any tool, it was a game changer. Amelia's model didn't merely react to data. It anticipated the future with an uncanny accuracy that left even seasoned experts in awe. On a crisp autumn morning, Amelia stepped into the towering glass boardroom of Summit Capital, one of the most prestigious venture firms on the West Coast. The room was filled with sharply dressed investors, their eyes assessing every detail with calculated precision. Behind her stood Daniel, the company's CEO, alongside a handful of senior executives. Their presence was solid, but Amelia knew this moment was hers to own. With steady hands, she connected her laptop to the massive display screen. The room fell silent, the air thick with anticipation. "Good morning," Amelia began, her voice calm yet commanding. "Today, you will see why this model doesn't just assess risk, it pinpoints where the future is most certain and profitable." For 16 minutes, Amelia held the room's attention. She walked them through live simulations, showcased real-time data analysis from the previous quarter, and demonstrated how her model outperformed industry benchmarks by over 30%. The tension was palpable as the presentation ended. Silence lingered in the room like a held breath, until Michael Trent, managing partner at Summit Capital, leaned forward and broke it with a nod of approval. This was more than just a demo. It was the start of something big, and Amelia was at the center of it. The moment Amelia left the boardroom, she felt an electrifying mix of triumph and relief. She had poured every ounce of her expertise, every late night and every painstaking revision, into that presentation. The polished smiles and nods from Summit Capital's investors felt like validation, a hard-earned acknowledgement of her vision and skill. But beneath the surface of her success, a storm was quietly brewing. Back at the office, the atmosphere was thick with excitement. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed through the hallways, and banners hung proudly proclaiming, $900 million secured, the future begins now. But as Amelia walked through the sea of celebration, a sinking feeling settled in her chest. Her name was nowhere to be found on those banners. No one approached her with congratulations. The spotlight that had shone so brightly in the boardroom now seemed to bypass her completely. Daniel, the CEO, was at the center of the festivities, basking in the applause as he gave a triumphant speech about leadership and vision. The entire company rallied around him, yet Amelia stood on the sidelines, invisible, overlooked. The realization hit hard. Despite being the architect of the technology that had just secured a historic investment, she was already being written out of the story. Her calendar was empty the next day. No strategy meetings, no follow-up sessions. The vibrant energy that once surrounded her project had shifted, replaced by a cold silence. When Leo, a young engineer fresh out of Stanford, approached her nervously to express confusion over internal documents that omitted her name entirely, Amelia's heart sank further. It wasn't a mistake, it was deliberate. Access to the tools and environments she had built was restricted. The simulation platform she developed, once the beating heart of their innovation, was now labeled restricted. Her corporate email was silent. Her once active role had become a hollow title. When Daniel passed by, he barely glanced at her, his words dripping with condescension. "You were getting too comfortable, Amelia." That moment fractured something inside her. The woman who had walked into the boardroom just days ago as a proud visionary now felt like a ghost haunting the corridors she had helped build. But Amelia was not one to fade quietly. That night, when the world outside her apartment felt indifferent and cold, she opened a dusty, long-forgotten file box tucked away in the back of her closet. Inside lay the original design drafts and, crucially, the licensing agreement she had crafted before joining the company. Clause 6.3.4. A powerful safeguard that reserved ownership of the intellectual property under certain conditions, including unethical treatment or misrepresentation. Her heart raced as she realized that by marginalizing her role and stripping her access, the company was violating that very clause. They had assumed ownership, but legally, the technology was still hers. A message arrived shortly after, quietly pinging her phone, a cryptic email from Michael Trent, the investor who had praised her in the boardroom. If your architecture were to stand alone, separate from corporate infrastructure, would it still function at full capacity? His question carried weight. Summit Capital wasn't just interested in the company, they were interested in her. With a renewed sense of purpose, Amelia began drafting a plan to reclaim what was rightfully hers. She wasn't seeking revenge, she was seeking justice. Working late into the night, she encrypted files, prepared legal documents, and slowly dismantled the layers of corporate control that had suffocated her. Days later, she quietly registered Keller Dynamics LLC, a company dedicated solely to refining and rebuilding her risk model. She reconnected with Leo, whose quiet support had blossomed into steadfast loyalty. Together, they began reconstructing the technology with a sharper, smarter edge, one immune to the politics and betrayals of their former employer. Meanwhile, Daniel and his executive team prepared a presentation to reassure investors and salvage the crumbling image of their company. But Amelia had one last move. At a critical investor meeting, with Summit Capital's managing partners present, she unveiled the notarized termination of the company's license to use her model. The room fell silent as she laid down the evidence that everything they thought they owned was, in fact, hers. Greg's confident facade cracked. The truth was undeniable. Summit Capital turned to Amelia for the final word, and with calm authority, she confirmed her system was not only functional but improved, faster, and more secure than ever before. The investment shifted immediately to her new company, sealing her victory. The aftermath was seismic. Media outlets hailed Amelia as a visionary who had stood her ground and reclaimed her legacy. Former colleagues reached out with apologies, admiration, and even offers to join her new venture. Keller Dynamics opened its doors with a team united by belief, integrity, and a shared vision for a better future. For Amelia, the battle had been more than professional, it was deeply personal. But through it all, she learned that true power lies not in titles or recognition, but in the courage to own your story, protect your creations, and rise above the shadows. Just as Amelia began to feel a flicker of hope, the unexpected hit like a storm she hadn't seen coming. It was early one Thursday morning when the first blow landed, not in the form of a confrontation, but a cold, impersonal email that froze her blood. The subject line read simply, "Compensation adjustment effective immediately." She opened it, expecting routine HR news, maybe a minor change. What she found instead was a brutal notice. Her base salary would be cut by 42%. Effective immediately, due to strategic realignment of departmental resources. No explanation, no warning, no chance to negotiate. The company that had just celebrated securing $900 million in investment had quietly sliced nearly half her pay. The very woman who'd built the technology that made it possible. Amelia stared at the screen, disbelief turning to anger and then to cold, sharp clarity. This wasn't an oversight, it was punishment. A message to remind her that she was expendable. The next day, when she walked into the office, the shift was undeniable. Her security badge no longer granted her access to the engineering floor. She had to be escorted by Leo, whose face was taut with unease. "They moved your desk," he whispered as they passed closed doors and muted conversations. Her new workstation was a cramped corner near the emergency exit, no windows, no monitors, surrounded by filing cabinets. The atmosphere was stifling. The simulation folders she once controlled were locked tight. Attempts to access key systems were met with the cold rejection. Access denied. The very project she had lived and breathed was now a cage. Daniel passed by, offering a smug glance. "Got your email?" His voice was casual, but the message was loud. "You should have seen this coming. You were getting too comfortable. Too visible." Amelia's jaw clenched. "Visible?" she echoed quietly. "I built the system you're celebrating." He leaned in, his breath cold. "You built it under our roof. You were compensated. Know your place." The words hit her like shards of ice. But instead of breaking, something inside Amelia hardened. It was a fracture, but not one that would shatter her. It was the birth of her resolve. The office became a ghost town around her. Colleagues she'd mentored suddenly avoided her gaze. Smiles evaporated like mist. No Slack messages, no meeting invites, just an empty calendar and the silence of isolation. Every attempt to engage was met with polite dismissal or outright avoidance. Leo hovered nearby, torn between loyalty and fear. One day, clutching a folder, he approached her. "I was asked to review this for the investor handoff next week. but half the architecture is a mystery to me. I thought maybe you could help?" Before Amelia could respond, Daniel's sharp voice cut through the air. "Leo. My office now." Leo froze, apology written all over his face. He mouthed, "Sorry," before retreating, leaving Amelia alone with the folder, her own work reduced to an enigma she could no longer access. She opened it anyway. Page after page, the architecture overview was stripped of her name. No, created by, no acknowledgement. It was as if she had never existed. The weight of betrayal pressed down. But Amelia refused to crumble. Instead, she spent the evening at home, sifting through a dusty file box she had hidden years ago, the original drafts, notarized agreements, and the all-important licensing contract she had crafted before joining the company. The one clause that protected her in cases of unethical treatment or role misassignment. With trembling hands, she reread the fine print. The intellectual property belonged to her, unless she had willingly relinquished it, and she hadn't. That night, a new message blinked on her phone, this time from Michael Trent, the investor who had recognized her brilliance. "Amelia," it read, "hypothetically, if your architecture were to stand alone, separate from corporate infrastructure, would it still function at full capacity? Just curious." Her heart raced. Stratus Capital wasn't blind to the company's tactics. They cared about the technology, and they cared about Amelia. From that moment on, everything shifted. The isolation and betrayal became fuel for her next move. Working quietly from her small apartment, she began decrypting her encrypted backups, rebuilding the risk model piece by piece, sharper and smarter than before. Leo, despite the risk, reached out with unwavering loyalty, offering to help build the new version away from the shadow of corporate politics. Meanwhile, Daniel and his team scrambled to maintain appearances. At an investor meeting, Amelia presented a notarized termination of the company's license to use her technology. The room fell silent as the truth unfolded. The company's $900 million foundation rested on technology they no longer had rights to. Greg's confident mask cracked. The room sensed the tectonic shift. Investors, once eager, now questioned everything. Michael Trent turned to Amelia with respect. "You're the only one telling the truth in this room." The power dynamic flipped in an instant. Daniel tried to dismiss her, but Amelia's calm, firm stance left no room for denial. "You don't need me," Daniel sneered. "The system runs fine without you." Amelia smiled, steady and cold. "Then why did you need to steal it?" Her voice echoed through the boardroom. The room, once a cage, had become her stage. The moment Daniel sneered, dismissing her as unnecessary, something within Amelia shifted irrevocably. For years, she had measured success by the approval of others, board members, CEOs, investors, but now, stripped of their validation, she saw herself with new clarity. This was no longer about proving her worth to them. It was about reclaiming her identity on her own terms. Sitting alone in the quiet of her small office at Keller Dynamics, Amelia reflected on the journey that had brought her here. The betrayal from Daniel and the company wasn't just a professional blow, it was a personal one, cutting deeper than she had expected. But it forced her to confront a truth she had buried beneath layers of ambition and hope. She had been allowing others to define her value. The silence of that night was profound. Her mind raced with memories of late nights debugging code, of moments where a spark of insight had ignited her passion. She remembered the excitement in the boardroom, the disbelief on investors' faces when her model outperformed every benchmark. And yet, she also recalled the coldness that followed, the erasure, the denial, the isolation. It was a painful paradox. She had created something transformative, yet was treated as disposable. But in this solitude, a new perspective emerged. Amelia realized that the power she sought had never truly been in their hands. It was hers all along. The technology, the ideas, the vision, they were extensions of her own creativity and determination. She recalled a phrase from her father's recorded message, the one she had found years ago in her private files: "Don't leave quietly. Leave loud, leave in a way they'll never forget." It was not just about making noise but about owning her story with fierce integrity. That night, Amelia drafted a letter, not a resignation, but a declaration. She would no longer chase recognition from those who refused to see her. Instead, she would build a future where her contributions were unassailable. She began reimagining the risk model, focusing on innovation without compromise. Freed from corporate constraints, she experimented boldly, integrating new data sources, refining algorithms, and enhancing predictive accuracy. Each line of code was a statement of independence. At Keller Dynamics, Leo became more than a colleague, he was a trusted ally who shared her vision. His youthful enthusiasm balanced her tempered wisdom, and together they forged a culture grounded in transparency, respect, and relentless pursuit of excellence. The new office, modest but filled with light and possibility, symbolized a fresh start. Unlike the cold, cramped cubicle she had been banished to, this space breathed optimism. Here, ideas flourished, and every voice mattered. Yet Amelia knew the path ahead would not be easy. The shadow of her former employer lingered, a reminder of the systemic obstacles faced by innovators, especially women in tech, but she was no longer burdened by their judgments or betrayals. Instead, she carried a deeper understanding of what it meant to lead with courage. Her perspective also shifted toward the larger impact of her work. The model wasn't just a product for profit, it was a tool that could shape markets, protect investments, and even anticipate humanitarian crises. The responsibility to wield this power ethically weighed on her, inspiring her to build a company that valued social good alongside financial success. In board meetings and strategy sessions, Amelia spoke with newfound clarity. She no longer sought approval but instead inspired conviction. Her team responded with loyalty and passion, energized by her vision and resilience. Outside the walls of Keller Dynamics, the narrative was changing too. News outlets began to recognize her as the rightful architect of the technology that had captivated investors. Public opinion shifted, turning the spotlight from corporate misappropriation to individual innovation and tenacity. Amelia embraced her role not just as a CEO but as a symbol for others who had been overlooked or erased. She championed diversity, equity, and inclusion, determined to create opportunities where merit and integrity were celebrated. This new perspective fueled strategic moves, partnerships with ethical investors, collaborations with academic institutions, and initiatives to mentor young women in STEM fields. Amelia was building more than a company, she was nurturing a legacy. As months passed, the strength of Keller Dynamics grew. The rebuilt model outperformed previous versions, and the company secured additional funding to expand its reach. But more importantly, Amelia felt a profound sense of fulfillment that transcended financial success. She was no longer defined by others' recognition but by her own unwavering belief in her work and values. One evening, after a long day of coding and planning, Amelia stood by the window of her office, gazing out at the city skyline. The lights twinkled like stars, a reminder of countless possibilities. She felt a quiet pride, not for what she had reclaimed, but for who she had become. The woman who once sought validation from powerful men now led with authenticity and strength. She had transformed adversity into opportunity, silence into voice, invisibility into presence. And as she turned away from the window, Amelia knew the story was far from over. The future was hers to shape, not as a shadow in someone else's empire, but as the architect of her own. As dawn broke over the Austin skyline, Amelia sat at her desk with a renewed sense of purpose. The hardships of the past weeks had crystallized into something powerful, an opportunity not just to reclaim what was lost, but to build something greater, something new. Her journey through betrayal and erasure had taught her that true innovation wasn't born from comfort or approval, but from resilience and vision. The risk model she had once built within the walls of a corporate giant was no longer bound by the limits imposed by others. It was her creation, and now it was hers to evolve freely. With Leo by her side, Amelia began drafting a strategic plan to expand Keller Dynamics beyond predictive finance. They envisioned a platform that could anticipate complex global challenges, climate volatility, humanitarian crises, economic shifts, and offer real-time insights to decision-makers worldwide. This vision was ambitious, but Amelia believed in its necessity. The model's predictive power could serve a higher purpose, driving not just profit but progress. Early that week, a call came through from Michael Trent, the investor who had quietly supported her from the beginning. His voice was calm, steady, filled with cautious optimism. "Amelia, we're ready to back Keller Dynamics with a substantial investment. But we want to see a roadmap, clear milestones and social impact." Her heart lifted. The door that had seemed slammed shut was now opening wider than she'd dared imagine. Amelia and Leo worked tirelessly, crafting a proposal that balanced cutting-edge technology with ethical stewardship. They highlighted how the platform's predictive analytics could empower nonprofits to allocate resources efficiently during crises, enable governments to preempt economic downturns, and help corporations minimize environmental risks. The pitch resonated deeply. By the next quarter, Keller Dynamics secured $150 million in Series A funding, a seedling in the shadow of the $900 million she had once helped attract under a different banner. But a seedling nurtured by integrity and purpose. With resources flowing, the team expanded. Amelia handpicked experts from diverse fields, data scientists, climatologists, economists, and ethicists, to join the mission. The company culture shifted from survival mode to one of innovation and collaboration. With an unyielding commitment to transparency. One of their first projects involved partnering with an international humanitarian agency to develop early warning systems for food insecurity in vulnerable regions. The results were staggering. The model accurately predicted impending crises weeks in advance, allowing aid organizations to mobilize efficiently and save countless lives. News of Keller Dynamics' success spread quickly. Amelia found herself invited to speak at conferences and forums, not just as a technologist, but as a leader advocating for responsible innovation. Yet, even amid growing acclaim, Amelia remained grounded. She remembered the isolation she'd endured, the silencing attempts, and the importance of giving voice to those often overlooked. That perspective guided the company's recruitment and mentorship initiatives, aimed at empowering underrepresented groups in tech. She championed policies fostering equity, knowing firsthand how vital it was to have diverse voices shaping the future. But the journey was not without challenges. Former employers launched legal battles, attempting to reclaim ownership and cast doubt on Keller Dynamics' legitimacy. The courtroom became another arena for Amelia to defend not only her work but the principle that innovation must be respected and protected. Each hearing reinforced her resolve. Supported by airtight contracts and a team of skilled lawyers, she turned every obstacle into a stepping stone. Public opinion, largely swayed by Keller Dynamics' transparency and impact, favored her cause. As the legal clouds cleared, Amelia's company grew more confident and ambitious. They unveiled a revolutionary update to the risk model, integrating AI-driven climate simulations that could forecast the financial implications of extreme weather events with unprecedented accuracy. This advancement caught the attention of major financial institutions and government agencies alike, eager to adapt to the growing threat of climate change. For Amelia, this was more than a business victory. It was a personal triumph over the forces that once tried to silence her. One crisp evening, Leo and Amelia stood overlooking their new office's panoramic windows, watching the city lights sparkle. "We're really doing it," Leo said softly, a mix of awe and pride in his voice. Amelia smiled, feeling the weight of every hardship behind them. "We are, and this is just the beginning." She knew the path ahead would be long and complex, but for the first time, she felt fully in control of her destiny. Amelia Harper was no longer just a brilliant engineer fighting for recognition. She was a visionary leader shaping a future where technology served humanity. Built on a foundation of courage, integrity, and unshakable belief in her own worth, months turned into a year, and Keller Dynamics blossomed from a fledgling startup into a respected leader in predictive analytics. But for Amelia, the true growth wasn't just in the company's balance sheets or the impressive technology they developed. It was in her own transformation as a leader, a visionary, and a person. Early on, Amelia had been driven by the need to prove herself. The wounds left by betrayal, erasure, and dismissal had fueled a fierce determination to reclaim what was hers. But as she navigated the complex terrain of entrepreneurship and innovation, she realized that leadership demanded more than brilliance or resilience. It required empathy, humility, and the courage to evolve. The challenges she faced forced Amelia to confront vulnerabilities she had long buried beneath a facade of strength. She grappled with moments of doubt, loneliness, and the pressure of carrying not just her dreams, but the hopes of her growing team and community. It was Leo who reminded her that vulnerability wasn't weakness. One afternoon, during a long strategy meeting, Amelia found herself overwhelmed by the weight of expectations. Frustrated, she confessed to Leo that she feared failing those who believed in her. Leo looked at her with steady eyes. "Amelia, you don't have to be perfect. We follow you because you're real. Because you're human." That moment shifted something profound in Amelia. She began embracing collaboration over control. trust over micromanagement. She invited open dialogue, welcomed feedback, even criticism, and cultivated a culture where mistakes were viewed as opportunities to learn rather than failures to hide. She also deepened her commitment to mentorship, recognizing how isolation had once threatened to consume her. Amelia made it a personal mission to create spaces where young innovators, especially women and minorities, could find support and guidance. She launched Harper Labs, an initiative within Keller Dynamics that offered internships, workshops, and scholarships to aspiring tech leaders from underrepresented backgrounds. The program became a beacon of hope, attracting talent eager to grow in an environment that valued their voices and dreams. Amelia's growth was also spiritual. She learned to balance ambition with self-care, carving out moments for reflection, meditation, and connection with loved ones. She rediscovered joy in small things, a morning run, a shared meal, a quiet evening with a book. This balance fueled her creativity and resilience. She found that when she nurtured herself, her leadership became more sustainable and inspiring. As Keller Dynamics expanded its reach globally, Amelia confronted new complexities, navigating partnerships with international organizations, addressing ethical dilemmas in AI, and steering the company through shifting political landscapes. Each challenge honed her wisdom and resolve. She became a sought-after voice in industry forums, advocating not just for innovation, but for responsible technology that respected human dignity and environmental stewardship. One particularly defining moment came during a global summit on climate and technology. Amelia was invited to speak alongside world leaders and top scientists. Standing before a packed auditorium, she shared the story of Keller Dynamics, not just its successes, but its trials, betrayals, and the journey to reclaim ownership and purpose. Her authenticity resonated deeply. Amelia spoke not as a distant executive, but as someone who had lived the struggle and emerged stronger. Her words inspired new alliances and collaborations, opening doors for her company and for the causes she championed. Back home, Amelia maintained a close-knit leadership team, grounded by shared values and trust. Leo had grown into his role as CTO, his youthful optimism balanced by Amelia's seasoned insight. Together, they fostered innovation and accountability, pushing boundaries while staying true to their mission. Amelia's personal growth also reflected in her relationships. She rebuilt connections that had frayed under the strain of her earlier struggles, finding strength in vulnerability and honest communication. Through it all, she never forgot the lessons of erasure and betrayal. They became the foundation of her empathy and her unwavering commitment to equity. One quiet evening, Amelia stood at the rooftop garden of their headquarters, gazing at the stars. The journey from that cold boardroom to this moment had been arduous, but it had shaped her into a leader capable of inspiring lasting change. She smiled softly, feeling a deep sense of peace and purpose. The woman who once feared invisibility now illuminated a path for others to follow. Amelia Harper was no longer just a survivor, she was a pioneer, a mentor, and a beacon of hope. After years of struggle, sacrifice, and relentless pursuit of her vision, Amelia stood at a new horizon, one defined not by the battles she'd fought, but by the legacy she was building. Keller Dynamics had become more than a company, it was a symbol of resilience, innovation, and integrity. But for Amelia, the greatest victory was the transformation within herself and the people she had inspired. The day the press release went live, announcing Summit Capital's $900 million investment in Keller Dynamics, Amelia felt a surge of emotions. This was no longer about money or recognition, it was about justice and the power of owning one's story. The headline carried her name front and center, no longer a footnote but the lead narrative. For the first time, the world saw her as she truly was, a visionary, a leader, and a force to be reckoned with. The article spread like wildfire, reaching every corner of the industry and beyond. Messages flooded in, from former colleagues seeking forgiveness, to young women who saw in Amelia a beacon of hope, to investors eager to join a company that valued truth and purpose above all else. Amelia embraced the moment not with arrogance, but with gratitude. She knew the road ahead would still hold challenges, but the foundation she had laid was unshakable. In the weeks that followed, Keller Dynamics expanded its team, welcoming dozens of talented individuals who shared Amelia's passion and principles. The office buzzed with energy and collaboration, a stark contrast to the cold isolation she had once endured. Here, every voice mattered, and every contribution was celebrated. Amelia also took on a new role beyond the boardroom. She became a mentor, a speaker, and an advocate for equity and innovation. Her story resonated deeply with those who had faced similar struggles, whether in technology, business, or any field where voices were too often silenced. She spoke at conferences and universities, sharing not just her technical expertise, but the lessons she had learned about courage, integrity, and the importance of standing firm in one's truth. One evening, after a particularly inspiring keynote, a young woman approached Amelia with tears in her eyes. "You gave me hope," she said simply. "I was ready to give up, but hearing your story made me believe in myself again." That moment crystallized everything Amelia had fought for. It wasn't just about technology or investments, it was about empowering others to find their voice and strength. Yet, Amelia remained humble. She credited her team, her mentors, and even the hardships that had forged her resilience. She understood that success was never a solo journey, but a collective one. Keller Dynamics continued to innovate, rolling out tools that not only predicted market risks but also helped communities prepare for environmental and social challenges. Their work saved lives, protected livelihoods, and inspired a new generation of ethical tech pioneers. Amelia's journey became a testament to the power of perseverance. She had faced erasure and betrayal, but she responded not with bitterness, but with boldness. She had transformed adversity into opportunity, isolation into community. Her story spread beyond tech circles, inspiring books, podcasts, and documentaries that highlighted the intersection of innovation, ethics, and personal courage. For Amelia, the greatest reward was knowing she had changed the narrative, not just for herself, but for countless others who dared to dream and stand their ground. As she looked out from the rooftop of Keller Dynamics' new headquarters, the city lights stretching endlessly before her, Amelia felt a deep sense of peace. The journey had been long and fraught with pain, but it had brought her to a place of power and purpose. And this was only the beginning. Amelia's story teaches us a timeless truth. Real power doesn't come from titles, recognition, or even success alone. It comes from owning your worth, standing firm in your truth, and refusing to be erased or silenced. Sometimes, the path to greatness requires enduring betrayal, isolation, and setbacks, but these hardships can forge a resilience stronger than any obstacle. She shows us that visibility isn't about loudness or force. It's about building something so undeniable, so authentic, that the world can no longer ignore it. When others try to diminish your light, remember that your value is inherent, not defined by external approval. Thank you for choosing to listen to this story among thousands of stories out there. Like and subscribe to continue listening to the latest stories.